our series, Stories to Live By. And we will, like earlier, we were in Luke chapter 12. If you want in your Bibles or on your phones and get to that passage, and we'll spend a little time in Matthew as well. You know, back in the 1800s, there was once a 350-pound wrestler in Europe. Now that's when wrestling was not choreographed and was the real thing here, of course. But in Europe, his name was Yusuf the Terrible Turk. And 350 pounds is a huge man, but there wasn't an ounce of flab on this man, they say. He was formidable, a force to be reckoned with, if you will. In his 4 years in Europe, he was impossible to beat, holding the undisputed title as champion in Europe. Then in 1898, he sailed over here to America, and he challenged the undefeated U.S. champion to a match. It was a man named Strangler Lewis. Okay? Now, Strangler was apparently about my height, weighing in at just a little over 200 pounds. Guess where we're headed here? And despite his rather small size, he was the heavyweight wrestling champion in America, and having defeated many men much larger than himself. Now, Strangler, his secret was very simple. You can catch by his name, can't you? I think they used to call it the sleeper hole as time goes on, but he would get around behind his opponent and put his massive arm around the neck and basically cut off their oxygen supply. Thus the name Strangler. When his opponents passed out, he'd hit them, and he would win the match. Now, the problem, though, was when Strangler met Yusuf, he faced a rather formidable opponent, but you see, Yusuf didn't appear to have a neck. One commentator noted that Yusuf's body went from his head to his massive shoulders with very little in between. There wasn't anything to get around. And thus Strangler Lewis met his match. He couldn't get his hold, and it wasn't long that Yusuf flipped Lewis to the mat and crushed him. And after winning the championship, though, the Terrible Turk demanded that all $5,000, a rather significant amount in 1898, all that money be paid to him in gold. Gold. And so he wrapped the championship belt around his waist, he stuffed his gold into the belt, and he boarded the next ship back to Europe. But halfway across the Atlantic, a storm struck up, and the ship began to sink. And when Yusuf attempted to get into a lifeboat, he fell into the water and he disappeared beneath the waves, never to be seen again. I don't know if they ever found the 5,000 either. It's not going to float. Right? Guess what happened, right? You can figure this all out. All his great wealth was too much even for this mighty champion of the world wrestler. And he sank like an anvil, and his great riches destroyed him. Now, you know, that's kind of interesting. We live in a society that is pulverized under the weight of wrong priorities, crushed by debt, pinned under a mountain of materialism. And what happens is that all this stuff blocks our vision of reality. And it causes us to miss out on the life that God has graciously given us. Such was the case with one man who interrupted Jesus. We read it a little bit earlier. He interrupted Jesus when he was talking about hypocrisy, about how much God cares and he values us and how we need to make an open confession of him before others. But this man wasn't there to listen to Jesus' wisdom. Rather, he wanted Jesus' help in the matter of his inheritance. So in verse 13 we read out, he says, he cried out, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." This guy wasn't interested in the truth that Jesus was sharing. He wasn't paying the slightest bit of attention. Instead, he was consumed with his own financial condition. But why come to Jesus? Well, the answer is found in Jesus' designation, if you will, as a teacher or a rabbi. You see, rabbis were knowledgeable of the law, and Jesus had demonstrated that many times as he opened up the law and spoke from it. And as such, they were expected to investigate it and were considered qualified then to judge ethical matters. And so this man was appealing to Jesus' authority and his knowledge of the law to force his brother to comply to share in the money, if you will. But look at verses 14 and 15. Jesus responds. He says, man, remember last week when we did this, he used the word friend. This time he's going, man, who appointed me a judge or an arbiter between you? Then he said to them, watch out. Be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Life does not consist in an abundance of possessions. And in saying that, Jesus rescued himself from judging between the two. Instead, he chose to get the heart of the matter, or the root cause of this man's problem. You see, this man was preoccupied with the wrong thing because his desire was greed-based. Jesus then goes on to establish this point through the parable that he goes on. You ever run into those issues? The issue that is about having what's rightfully mine, what somebody feels they deserve. Many years ago, Karen used to work in the law firm here in town, and she did the estate work. And she at times would come home shaking her head and say, families are just nuts some days. You know, just for the one who even got 5 minutes out of the office, I got a call from another family member that said, he can't do that, can he? Yeah, he could. But it was about greed and the money. And so Jesus tells the parable. Look again at verses 16 through 21. It says, the ground of a certain rich man yielded an abundant harvest. And he thought to himself, what shall I do? I have no place to store my crops. And then he said, this is what I'll do. That light bulb that went off in his head. I will tear down my barns and build bigger ones, and I will store my surplus grain. And I'll say to myself, you have plenty of grain laid up for many years. Take life easy. Eat, drink, and be merry. But God said to him, you fool. This very night your life will be demanded from you. Then who will get what you have prepared for yourself? And this is how it will be with whoever stores up things for themselves, but is not rich towards God. And the message is simple. Spiritual poverty occurs when our satisfaction depends upon the accumulation of stuff, of wealth. You know, remember the old bumper sticker that says, the one with the most toys wins? That's that possession. It would be wise for us to evaluate our desires considering what Jesus has to say in this parable, isn't it? There are several warning signs that we want to take a look at. 5, matter of fact, the parable reveals here. Those ways that we find our satisfaction other than in the Lord. Or as Jesus put it, when someone is not rich towards God. So let's take a look at some warning signs. The first one is that our savings crosses into hoarding. Our savings crosses into hoarding. Hoarding is what the rich man was doing. The success that he experienced brought him to one conclusion. Where am I going to store it all? And he thought of nothing else or no one else but himself, and not of those that he could certainly help. Nor did he consult God as to what God may have wanted to do, forgetting that it was the Lord who gave him the ability to gain the wealth in the first place. We're reminded in Deuteronomy 18, says, and you shall remember the Lord your God, for it is he who gives you power to get wealth. It's not us. This man's entire thought was in stockpiling his future. The barns he already had were filled with crops, and so in his mind, they had to be torn down. How else was he going to make way for bigger and better barns that could hold more? That's where his focus was. Now, there's absolutely nothing wrong with saving. Don't misunderstand what I'm saying here. It's the proper and prudent thing to do. But savings can become dangerous for our spiritual health and wealth when it develops into hoarding. I have to have more. It becomes the number one priority in our lives. How can we tell? When our savings go beyond what we can reasonably use and for those rainy days or unexpected expenses, when what we have over our own needs is needed by others. You ever go through and see somebody and say, boy, I wish I really could help them? Because our focus is what? Usually on us. God will bring those into our lives that we can be able to help and meet their needs. You see, anything that goes to waste and storage is often there. We need to be careful not to allow our desire to save, which again is proper on our part, doesn't move into greed. But when our saving becomes hoarding, it's a sign that we're finding our satisfaction in the wrong place, which in the end will result in our own spiritual poverty. Second warning sign we need to take a look is that our goal is self-indulgence. And as a way of contrast, I want to tell you a story of Osceola McCarty, who at the age of 87 retired from her personal laundry business. And she would do the laundry for the wealthy in her hometown in Mississippi for years. And it was all she knew. And being pulled out of school in the 6th grade to care for an ailing family member and help her mom with the laundry, that's what she knew. And so that's what she learned to do from the age of 6. McCarty is now famous for her laundry, but not in the way that we might think. After she retired, she asked her banker how much that she had saved. She paid attention to it. And the amount was rather staggering. She had $250,000, $250,000. But she didn't hoard it or use it exclusively upon herself. She just knew that she paid for her expenses and she put some away. That's what it was. And she said, I had more than what I would use in the bank, and I can't carry anything away from here and with me, so I thought it was best to give it to some child to get an education. So she gave $150,000 of it to the University of the Southern Mississippi to help African American youth to attend college, to help others gain what she didn't get, having been taken out of school. For this act, she was interviewed by Barbara Walters, CNN, People Magazine, and many more, where she eventually was given the Presidential Citizenship Award. And her response to all this, she says, it's more blessed to give than to receive. McCarty is what you might call the antithesis of the rich man in our story today. The whole story, if you notice, is in the first person. I will do this. I will do that. It isn't that his success was